Okay, so before we begin, we will do some little bit of, there you go, Meghna, go ahead. Prayers to the Guru. Channel
Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sattvajatam Sarvagana Raghunatam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Bhaktivedanta
Okay, so we have not too much time today. It'll be shorter because we have to end on time. Some other Devikis we can get on our way nicely. Is that lined up properly, Meghna? Okay. So, the English of this verse we just read: the Lord was pacified after killing those kings who were burdensome to the earth. They were puffed up, full of pride, with their military strength, their horses, elephants, chariots, infantry, etc. He himself was not a party in the fight. He simply created hostility between the powerful administrators, and they fought amongst themselves. He was like the wind which causes friction between bamboos, and so sparks a fire. This is very nice, because you're going to actually see how the Lord he's like the hidden hand of the Lord is everywhere in life. Not a blade of grass moves without the Lord's sanction. And even when great demonic personalities, when they quarrel with each other, or all these problems that come up in the world, the Lord is actually the hidden hand behind it all. And actually this was the case in the battle of Kurukshetra. So Prabhupada is saying, as stated above, the living beings are not factual enjoyers of things which are manifested as God's creation. We talked about this yesterday, the false ego. The Lord is the genuine proprietor and enjoyer of everything manifested in His creation. Unfortunately, influenced by the deluding energy, the living being becomes a false enjoyer. What is that? That's the false ego. That's exactly what that is. Under the dictation of the modes of nature. Puffed up by such a false sense of becoming God, the deluded living being increases his material strength by so many activities, and thus becomes the burden of the earth. So much so that the earth becomes completely uninhabitable by the sane. So what happens is when one has a very large false ego and thinks one is the enjoyer and this world is for his enjoyment, under that nature, he becomes so deluded, and more, he creates such a burden on the earth. He becomes a burden, or he or she becomes a burden on all that surround him and anyone who surrounds such a person. Even right now, you have all these political leaders, and I'm not saying even the current one. It's totally, everyone's got false egos. But by such false egos, they create such crazy situations. So this is what happens. the earth becomes completely uninhabitable by the sane. So really very tough for the devoted, proper behaving people. So this state of affairs is called dharmasya glani, or misuse of the energy of the human being. When such misuse of human energy is prominent, the saner living beings become perturbed or disturbed by the awkward situation created by the vicious administrators, who are simply burdens of the earth, and the Lord appears by his internal potency just to save the saner section of humanity and to alleviate the burden due to the earthly administrators in different parts of the world. I mean, you see this, there's always something happening where, some, like for instance, a good example in history, modern history, would be Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler, he rose to power, even maybe, he used a lot of Vedic symbolism. He was really an interesting guy, even vegetarian, but for whatever reason, he got some idea that certain sections of the world were burdening it. And so he had a really burdensome idea where, we'll do something terrible to this group of people. And he started doing. And him, in his false ego, he was on such a power trip thinking that I'm in the right. He was thinking he was in the right. And maybe he even, if you look historically, he had some decent points. There was a lot of oppression that certain parties had formed against him and his country and so on. But even though that may have been slightly correct, you could see such a false ego, such a false sense of justice and righteousness and enjoying for him and his people, that he did what was now known as probably the worst atrocity in modern history. But that's the nature of the false ego. You become a burden to the earth instead of, no one is trying to be necessarily a burden to the earth, but it just so happens when one gets intoxicated by material enjoyment, you automatically become a burden. I've seen that in my own. I'm managing. I'm in a manager position, right? Like this. So, good morning, Kim. Yes. Good morning. So I'm in a manager position. Good morning, Spencer. Good morning. And I've seen that sometimes if I don't, really keep Krishna in the center, I start barking orders, this, that, and the other, and I see, I'm burdening everybody. I detect it. I notice, I'm becoming a burden to everybody. But sometimes, if Krishna's in the center, there's a role for the manager. He can help, facilitate that Krishna is being served nicely. But if it stops becoming about Krishna, what happens is burdensome. I become burdensome. We become burdensome on others. So this is actually how it works. We try to enjoy, we become a burden to others. We try to serve Krishna. Even if others are burdened by us, it's ultimately for their good. We're ultimately doing the highest good for them and all others. So this has to be understood. But the Lord, He's the one who designed this system of how the false ego becomes burdensome to the world. And He's the hidden hand. And what it'll end up doing, it'll lead it to its destruction. And it'll lead those people who are living under the false ego to their destruction. And you see this in history over and over again. Someone becomes very proud and puffed up. They get, like in the Roman Empire, the fall of Rome, the fall of every great civilization, even now probably the fall of America. You better believe it's coming. It's I don't know if there will be an opportunity to make America great again. We don't really know. It doesn't look necessarily that good. But why? Because what would cause its fall? It ultimately, just like the Lord is the wind, who is causing the bamboos to clack against each other, and this is what causes a great forest fire. So similarly, all of the the Lord's circumstances and the people who are puffed up by their pride and their false ego, they'll eventually clack against each other. And instead of making the world or America or this place great again, what'll end up happening, which is maybe even their intention. Like Hitler wanted to make Germany great again, which was why he was doing what he was doing. But what he ended up doing, he ended up causing a huge problem, a whole world war, and it set the whole world back. So this is why ultimately this is Krishna's system. The person who chases the false ego never gets what they desire ultimately. And what ends up happening is a better situation for the righteous arises. It's always a relief. Those who stick by the devotional righteous principles do get relief. It may not come immediately. Actually, it never almost comes immediately. Because it requires some faith. It requires some testing of the faith. Even, yesterday I was just telling you guys with our financial situation. It's always every time the account gets low, I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Am I mismanaging? But it's just like, no, just have faith, do the right thing, and then boom, Krishna, he provides these type of things. So anyhow, it works. Okay, he does not favor either the unwanted administrators, but by his potential power, he creates hostility between such unwanted administrators as the air creates fire in the forest by the friction of the bamboos. The fire in the forest takes place automatically by the force of the air, and similarly the hostility between different groups of politicians takes place by the unseen design of the Lord. The unwanted administrators, puffed up by false power and military strength, thus become engaged in fighting amongst themselves over ideological conflicts, and so exhaust themselves of all powers. You're going to see this. I don't want to scare anyone, but astrologically speaking, 2030 is the, at least Vedic astrology, this is the next prominent mass death period in the world. 2030 to 2032. We'll see if it actually comes true. But, we have some time, but actually it looks like there will probably, and you're seeing it, at least I'm detecting it, seeing how vicious the political enmity is between each of the parties. It's almost certain that they're going to eventually, maybe there's a civil war here, maybe there's a world war, who knows what's going to happen. But why? Because the different parties of politicians, they're getting very puffed up with their secured power, and next thing you know, they're going to cross each other in such a way, and then boom, just like bamboo, it'll spark fire. So Krishna actually, he's the power that does that. He's the interaction of the false ego that actually causes everything to get destroyed. All of the false ego powers to get destroyed. He's the wind that moves the bamboo, and it's going to cause the whole forest fire. Haribol. So like that. The fire in the forest takes place automatically by the force of the air, and similarly the hostility between different groups of politicians takes place by the unseen design of the Lord. The unwanted administrators, puffed up by false power and military, we read that, thus becomes engaged in fighting amongst themselves over ideological conflicts, and so exhaust themselves of all powers. The history of the world reflects this factual will of the Lord, and it will continue to be enacted until the living beings are attached to the service of the Lord. So that means it'll always be happening in the material world. Why? Because we're not attached to serving the Lord. But this is the thing. All kinds of calamities that are going to come. This is what will attach you to the service of the Lord. Because you realize we don't have control. We can't control this thing. So the sane person, they try to serve the Lord and they try and be pleasing to the Lord. Because they know that's the only place of refuge and salvation. In the Bhagavad Gita, this fact is very vividly described in 7.14. It is said, "The diluting energy is my potency, and thus it is not possible for the dependent living beings to supersede the strength of the material modes." Interesting, because in the translation of the Bhagavad Gita, it says very difficult. But actually Prabhupada's saying here, it's not possible. It is not possible to cross over Maya by your own strength. It is not possible. Despite all of your endeavors and energies, the Lord has to sanction to supersede the strength of the material modes. But those who take shelter in me, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, can cross over the gigantic ocean of material energy. This means that no one can establish peace and prosperity in the world by fruitive activities or by speculative philosophy or ideology. The only way is to surrender unto the Supreme Lord and thus become free from the illusion of the diluting energy. This is the only way. Unfortunately, Persons who are engaged in destructive work are unable to surrender to the personality of Godhead. They are all fools of the first order. They are the lowest of the human species of life. They are robbed of their knowledge, although apparently they seem to be academically educated. They are all of the demoniac mentality, always challenging the supreme power of the Lord. So these are the people you want to avoid, actually. The people who have not deep believers, don't have faith. Now, it doesn't necessarily, like, for instance, me and my wife, we just had a baby. And we needed help to have the baby. We weren't, we didn't want to go to the hospital, but we needed help. So we invited some midwives and things like that. So the midwives were very helpful, but it was a little rough around the edges because not everyone was a believer of the Lord. But there was one, and actually she was here the other day. There was one doula who was a very strong, had a very strong faith, and we liked her so much. We were so happy with her. There, like, every time we needed help from the midwives, she was the most comforting to us. And so we even see, lately, she just checked in on my wife. She had a wonderful visit when she was here. I think she got some prasadam. She was talking to Mother Devaki. There, everyone was happy and all these things. But, those who don't surrender unto the Lord, what do they end up doing? They end up creating destructive environments more and more and more and more. Because they're ultimately foolish and they don't know what's good for them or anybody. And everything they do in their foolishness only makes things worse and worse and worse. They're all of demoniac mentality, always challenging the supreme power of the Lord. Those who are very materialistic, always hankering after material power and strength, are undoubtedly fools of the first order because they have no information of the living energy, and being ignorant of that supreme spiritual science, they are absorbed in material science, which ends with the end of the material body. Because they have no information of who they even are as a spirit soul and the spiritual nature of all things. You can say Brahman realization. Ultimately, they're absorbed in the Panchabhuta energy, or maybe the 5 elements, or maybe even the interaction with the mind and senses and false ego. But ultimately, they miss the whole point of life. They have completely the wrong information in the GPS. They're totally going to go. They're not going to get to the destination they think they're going to get to. That's all people in this material world who aren't surrendered unto the Lord. So, they're robbed. Oh no, they're the lowest of human beings because the human life is especially meant for reestablishing the lost relation with the Lord, and they miss the opportunity by being engaged in material activities. They are robbed of their knowledge because even after prolonged speculation, they cannot reach the stage of knowing the personality of Godhead, the summum bonum, or the topmost of everything. And all of them are men of demoniac principle, and they suffer the consequences, as did such materialistic heroes as Ravan, Hiranyakashipu, and Kamsa, and others. So, this is our issue. This will be it today. So we have a short Bhagavatam class today. But this is the issue, is that the false ego. This was our subject matter in yesterday's class, and interesting, Krishna wanted us to continue in Bhagavatam today. This is our issue, the false ego. We get very puffed up, and we got to watch, especially me, because I have some position. Some position or things like this, I can go mad, I can go crazy in this. But by good fortune, part of my position, if I do it properly, is reading the Bhagavatam every day. And by seeing this, any sane man they'll be cleansed of their material desires. They'll be cleansed ultimately of the false ego, because that's what the hearing Krishna's messages does. It actually dissolves the false ego and gives you the actual real ego, which is we're servants of the Lord. And anytime you forget that, please just keep hearing the messages of Krishna. You'll eventually remember. Nice to hear from experienced devotees like Mother Devaki and many of the other guests who they have much more deeper realization, where when you get to hear from them, it's like a super boost. You do your everyday progress that you're making, but then all of a sudden, you get like a super boost from like a senior advanced devotee, and that's just the mercy of the Lord. So just like the wind will come and cause forest fire for those in the false ego, the wind in the form of the Lord, for the positive, he'll cause like a forest fire of love of Godhead. So this is actually, for those who keep being sincere, don't worry, it will come. Yes, we can't provide everything here at Mantra Central, but who knows, maybe some outside mercy or source, the Lord, he's the wind, he's coming, He'll either cause a forest fire of destruction for the materialists, but it'll also cause a forest fire of love of God. And that's the type of forest fire we're trying to be a part of. So anyhow, thank you guys for attending today. I hope you're all well. Thank you guys for your services. I know you're all working so hard, and even though we're so many imperfections are here, the Lord's mercy is with all of us. So, Hare Krishna. Thank you, and we'll see. Thank you who joined online. I know it's very short today, but